There's also numerous other kinds of competition going on in this film. Greetings, this is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers, I'm your host, and today we'll take a look at a recent film, Shakespeare in Love. This was directed by John Madden, from a screenplay by Mark Norman and Tom Stoddard. Stars John Fiennes, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jeffrey Rush, Colin Firth, Ben Affleck, and a cast of many. And the acting was quite strong in this particular film. The production value is superior. We thought that this was particularly true of the costumes and set designs. The camera work was very good. There are a lot of quick cuts in this particular film. Quick, brief scenes. It gives a thickened and quickened aspect to this film, so that when things are not really happening all that much on the screen, there seems to be a lot happening. At any rate, it's pretty well directed, I think. Now, I believe the personality of this film owes more to the shtetls of Eastern Europe than to Elizabethan England, London. But I don't fault the film at all for this. I think there's kind of a brotherhood, a universality of actorhood, and I don't see any problem here. The film has some historical anomalies. For instance, we are told at the outset of this film that the time period is 1593. And shortly thereafter, we learn from one of the main characters, the Duke of Wessex, that he plans to go to his Virginia plantation in America. Well, as my understanding of history is that the first trip to colonize America, the Virginia colony, was in 1607. That's 14 years into the future, so something is not quite right here, but time flies and the stage is magical, and perhaps, as Mr. Henslow would say, it's a mystery. At any rate, we find that in this particular dialogue, this screenplay rather, by Norman and Stoddard, that we have a lot of contemporary Hollywoodish, Broadwayish type of lingo, concepts, and so forth, which we would really expect to see on Broadway more than anything else. And in fact, this play, this movie might well have been entitled something like "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Rose," or something of this kind. But it all works out fine. I think that Shakespeare has more than his share of dumb jokes, and I would not object at all to what Norman and Stoddard did. At any rate, there's a good deal of contemporary Broadway scene material that is put into the Elizabethan context, I suppose, on the notion that it's pretty universal, and if it happened now, it would probably happen then too. We see little satiric stabs at humor in the sense of posters with credits which appeared to be numerous and pompous, and call to mind some of those we see in film and on Broadway, no doubt, nowadays. Also, there are a lot of kind of inside jokes of the type that are consistent with Shakespeare, but remind one of modern Broadway as well. 2 We also meet up with young John Webster, sort of a creepy kid. He turns out to be cruel and with a love of blood and guts and so forth, even set at this early age, frequenting himself amongst the cats and mice of the alleys and so forth, a fink and spy for the police or anyone who would give him some coins, and really a nasty little lad. We have also the players. There's a certain competition, as it were, between the players for each theater, as well as a flowing back and forth of talent. So we have all these kinds of things flowing about and whatnot. The film sort of opens up the meat of it with a scene of the Rose, and inside Mr. Henslow, played by Jeffrey Rush, being tortured by Fenneman, Mr. Fenneman, a loan shark, so to speak, and a couple of his thugs. Fenneman wants his money now, and of course Henslow doesn't have it. He does have a play in the offing, however, a play by Mr. William Shakespeare, a comedy which he assures Mr. Fenneman will bring in some loot involving a pirate, love, no doubt there'll be dogs in there and so forth, all the ingredients to have him rolling in the aisles. Well, this causes Fenneman to pause. He calculates what is owed and what could be drawn from this particular play and sees a profit for him in this. He'll get his money back, plus there'll be a little extra and so forth. Now, Mr. Henslow cautions him that the actors will have to be paid. Nevertheless, Henslow says, well, there won't be any profits, though. There are never any profits. And Fenneman says, exactly. And then there's this kind of enlightened understanding, the sort of agreed and con in the look of Henslow about this. And of course, it refers basically to the techniques used by Hollywood producers to sort of cheat the actors who were sucking into going for a percent of the profit. Well, anyway, he gets a reprieve of about 2 weeks. He quickly, after Fenneman leaves with his thugs, goes and checks out his artist, Mr. William Shakespeare. Mr. William Shakespeare is seen to be having a difficult time writing. His fingers smeared with writer's ink, but unfortunately getting poor results. He has what he claims to be a writer's block, but he assures Henslow that everything is fine and going along apace and so forth. We see the fine presentation of Shakespeare as a part-time ardent poet, a part-time con man, a part-time sort of weak knave, and a part-time impetuous adventurer, and so forth. A man of many parts, something of a scoundrel thrown in as well. He is a borrower and does not hesitate copying some possible lines or thoughts or conceits from any possible giver. He shoos away Henslow, who seems a little bit pacified by the assurance, and he himself goes to see a shrink of the time, alchemist, I suppose, but at any rate, he goes in and the hourglass is flipped over, coins passed, and he begins to talk to the shrink, who quickly begins to hone in on a possible dysfunctional libido, don't they always? At any rate, Shakespeare is given a serpent amulet with a mouth that will allow the insertion of some sort of note which with the proper written words given to the right person will get good results. He intends to give it to Rosalind, a rather morally loose woman associated with Burbage in his curtain theater. She seems to be his main love interest at this point in time. Now it's clear that Shakespeare is a man who gets about, as do most of the theater people, and makes use of the Heidi Fleshers of the period. But at any rate, he has a kind of a mild torch for Rosalind, but he soon discovers that she is being used by others as well. So there is a certain diminution of passion here. But he does give her the snake, the serpent bracelet, which she takes, and makes all sorts of protestations about his being numero uno with her. And as with most men, he's a sucker for such. So he wants to believe that, and so off he goes. She is, and he also, are kind of examples of why theater folk have gotten sort of a bad reputation for being immoral or amoral and so forth. However, when one looks at the doings of the aristocratic crowd and the merchant elite, commercial elite, so to speak, as exemplified by the Duke of Wessex and Mr. de Lesseps, the hypocrisy is clear. Now, and of course the theater people make no hiding of this particular aspect of them, and in fact it's witnessed by such modern films as Arthur with Al Pacino and Diane Cannon and Tuesday Weld, but and many others. At any rate, they express themselves, shall we say. He is still trying to work this deal out, to work out his play. He does get at least a scene or two going, maybe an act, and there's a kind of a curtain call. They get a bunch of under-talented and or wannabe actors from a tavern that they apparently frequent, and they start having a roll call, the tryouts and so forth. Shakespeare attending, listening, no, thank you, no, we can't use you, and so forth. A few are taken, particularly by Henslow, who has made a promise, for instance, to his barber that he can have a role, or that sort of deal, a paying of debts, a quid pro quo. Anyway, they almost all go. We see William Shakespeare sort of slumped over, and there's one more person to give a recitation. It turns out to be Ms. de Lesseps. Now, we have first run into her at an earlier theatrical performance before the Queen. She is in her lovely young daughter role, and there is a clown and a dog and so forth that has them howling, and a recitation of a sonnet. And you can see her mouthing the words of the sonnet as the player speaks, and understand her to be a very romantic young woman. She has a love of the theater and kind of a detestation of her own position as a rich man's daughter, particularly since she knows she's going to be bartered for a bride. At any rate, she has gotten in the mind to go and try out for the stage and for this Shakespeare play, and she, with the help of her nurse, has made herself look to be a young man, even with a little mustache and a goatee of sorts. Anyway, she gives such a wonderful performance, intelligent and passionate, and professional that it catches the attention of Shakespeare, who arises and then calls out in excitement, "Take off your hat." Well, she can't do that because it would expose her long hair, and one of the aspects of this time is that females could not be on the stage, period. Immoral, part of the hypocrisy here. There is a local censor, by the way, called the Master of Revels, who, when he's not closing down theaters or threatening to do so, is engaging in the pleasures of Rosalind's company. At any rate, there is this problem, and she runs off rather than take her hat off. Shakespeare runs after her. The pursuit continues. She gets on a boat and is rowing across the river toward her father's very large estate, abode, and Shakespeare is pursuing. Here we have an opportunity for the screenwriters to insert some contemporary style humor, and we have the boat rower, who is sort of a correlative of a taxi driver, mentioning to Shakespeare that he thought maybe he had seen him before. Implications of maybe some fame or notoriety here. Then he mentions that he had the famous playwright Christopher Marlowe on his boat, which was, of course, not so good for Shakespeare's ego. And later on, this boat guy would appear and wish to give a manuscript to Shakespeare in the hopes that he could get it maybe published. One of his friends might be interested in using it and so forth, calling to mind the tens of thousands of wannabe writers and so forth who are palming off unsolicited manuscripts to famous people who happen to cross their path with high hopes that maybe it'll be read. At any rate, she makes her escape into the big abode of de Lesseps. Her name Viola. She has the AKA Tom Kent, and at this point in time, Shakespeare still thinks that this is a lad. At the de Lesseps abode, there's a party going on. She quickly transforms herself into fetching lass with the help of her maid and goes down to dance. And Shakespeare determines that he's going to crash this particular ball. He sees some musicians coming that he knows, finds out a little bit about it, goes in with them, and enjoys a dance or two. And in the dance, gets to dance with Viola de Lesseps, and there is almost like a love or passion or connection of some sort at the first meeting of eyes. She already knows him and probably already has pictured herself with him and so forth, so it's easy going for him. Now, this is noticed by Wessex, who gets very angry with this. After all, this woman is his intended bride and meal ticket, who is going to salvage his hopes for wealth in the New World and in a tobacco plantation he is going to run. He pulls a knife, puts it to the throat of Shakespeare and said, "What is your name? I ought to cut your throat now, and I'll do it later. What's your name?" And of course, with this sort of questioning, few people would be honest, and Shakespeare brings forth the name Christopher Marlowe. "Oh, Christopher Marlowe, well, I'll see you later." Well, at any rate, he gets away and kind of hangs around in the garden. The party over, Viola kind of undresses with the help of the maid and goes out on the balcony, and she notices Shakespeare and he, her, and passionate doings kind of snowball here, and their relationship becomes quite an item. In fact, there's so much smooching in this film between Fiennes and Paltrow that you couldn't help but notice that there was a kind of a aesthetic displeasure in the the way that Fiennes went about it. We blame the director, John Madden, for this stage kissing that I think was aesthetically incorrect. At any rate, they're getting thicker and thicker, and passion's building and so forth. Meanwhile, the play is continuing on, and things are progressing there. Ben Affleck brings over a troupe of professional actors who have a little time on their hands from Burbage's The Curtain, which apparently has nothing doing at that point in time. He is promised a role which Shakespeare describes in more glowing terms than the script actually provides. And this is true of all of the actors, and all of them naturally begin to build up their own role and so forth, and each determines the play's real importance in terms of their own role and for comic effect. We see this thing developing, and it gets looking pretty much like maybe it's going to work. Even Fenneman gets the stage bug here, and eventually will get a small part as the apothecary. There is, however, a problem with Wessex and Shakespeare and Paltrow, and she continues as Tom Kent in that disguise. It might be said that Shakespeare is had in this particular film by one of his own favorite devices, that is, a character who is disguised as another character to achieve a certain result. And this is precisely what happened with Viola's Tom Kent. At any rate, there are all kinds of doings. We have practicing sword fights and so forth. Then we have Burbage and his crew coming over for a semi-realistic real fight with Henslow and his crew on the stage of the Rose. And then we have the irate Wessex showing up to have a real life and death fight with Shakespeare on the stage also. So that everything, even this very real attempt, seems unreal in the context of it being on the stage and so forth. And of course, we have a play within the play to begin with, and the viewers are watching it, so it's sort of like a play within a play within a play. You can see a sort of infinite reduction of theater here somehow or other. But at any rate, it's all pretty good fun. And we even have some trite expressions thrown in, such as break a leg and whatnot, when the thing finally gets going. At any rate, we have Tom Kent playing the role of Romeo. There is a lad who's playing the role of Juliet. Well, as happens in more than one film out of Hollywood, there is a chance for a star to be born here. In fact, there is a film, A Star is Born, along this line. That is, the character who is playing Juliet can't do the job on the night that it happens. We have, therefore, the character of Mrs. de la Salle Viola shanghaied, as it were, into the role. She volunteers, of course. There are some people who know who she is. She goes down and pretends to be Tom Kent, pretending to be Juliet. So we have a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, and she does a magnificent job with her role as Juliet. She does not fool the queen, but there is a moment of danger in that John Webster, the lad, the creepy lad, has finked to the master of revels that a real woman was on the stage, and there was a threat of arrest here at the conclusion. And this is saved by the Queen herself, Elizabeth I, who pretends that the Juliet is indeed Mr. Tom Kent. and therefore overrules the nasty lad John Webster, commending the master of revel for his vigilance, but an honest mistake, and so forth. But the Queen knew something about women in men's occupations and so forth, and this was not one. So all's well that ends well here. There's a good deal of rushing back and forth, passion between Shakespeare and de Lesseps till the very end. The Queen, however, tells her that she will have to find, that is, Tom Kent, will have to find Viola de Lesseps because she must go off with her husband now, the Duke of Wessex, who will take her to America. It's her duty. Well, there's a kind of a last meeting, an epilogue, so to speak, and we have Paltrow and Fiennes kind of parting, and she becomes clearly the inspiration for his next play, a comedy, The Twelfth Night. And we kind of part on this, this note. So it's a very good film, a very enjoyable film, and amusing. Not for everyone, perhaps, but for those who do like films and stage and so forth, certainly. That is a wrap for this evening. We have to close. This is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers. I'm your host, and thank you for tuning in this evening. Hope to see you again next time, and until such time, Greetings, this is Top Hat and Buttered Popcorn. My name is John Savers. I'm your host, and today we'll look at a few films, beginning with Twister. Twister was directed by Jan de Boot. It stars Helen Hunt, Carrie Elwes, and a German named Paxton. It has a screenplay written by Michael Crichton from his novel on this particular subject. And the film is basically two films. You have the first film, which is basically has as its star Industrial Light and Magic as the Twister. And in this particular film, we have a kind of a monster movie type of film. In fact, Industrial Light and Magic tried to invest the tornado in a kind of roaring, bestial type of sound. However, this film could not really match up to the better quality horror monster genre films, because the people begin to understand that the Twister is not really invested with the traditional evil, which makes for a good monster or horror flick. But rather, this is like a chance disaster, like a flash flood or something like that, and does not have an evil component per se. You do not have that sense with these. However, it does fit into this general category at any rate. The film, this kind of film is usually a grade B film, and I think that this probably would be a proper place to put this. It is certainly primarily a special effects film. And I think that most people went to this film, I'm one of those, basically to take a look at the special effect of the tornado and associated effects. I thought they were pretty good at the outset and so forth, but after a little bit of watching these tornadoes and so forth, it gets a little tiresome. The interest wanes. There's a feeling of being a little bored by about halfway through this film. However, there were points where the interest was spiked due to such intriguing things as flying cows and fuel trucks and so forth. And we see a little episode where a house, we have an aunt, the Carrie Elwes character, trapped in her house, and this effect I thought was pretty good, the rescue and the final crashing of it and so forth. It has, in this sense, a kind of nick in time aspect to it, which is not uncommon in both chase and horror films, and kind of is necessary, I think, to it's sort of a correlative of a music hook. You have these techniques that are kind of expected that kind of spike your interest along the way and keep you in the game, as it were. The grade B films are kind of interesting in this respect, that Hollywood used to have what appears to be kind of like a caste system, and you rarely saw anyone in the grade B films, or the stars of grade B films, in the top films, and vice versa. This is not to say the grade B films did not sometimes do well, be well done, well acted, and so forth. Good story, worth seeing. We also have now a lot of films, it seems to me, quite a few films that have characters such as Christopher Walken, who is in and of himself not really strong enough an actor to lead a film. But he, in conjunction with a bunch of others of similar supporting actor character, are often gathered together for a film. And I think such films as Pulp Fiction would be once, Getting Shorty, or Get Shorty. These kinds of things, Mulholland's Fall, the gathering together of all these second and third tier characters, basically to make a film, usually of action, and usually its draw is the very large number of names, even though they're not first rank. We have in the second film, I call film 2 of this two-parter, or this one film with two films in one, we'll call it that way. The second film is basically a story of love lost and gained, and Paxton has sort of separated from Eloise and kind of looking for a divorce. He's taken up with Hunt, and we have really a soap opera-like a plot here, joined to a chase scene, or framed with a chase, and things develop, and the Paxton Eloise get back together. They find that they indeed have much in common, and still have love and so forth. And Hunt is a good loser in this, and so forth. Now, this particular film, I don't think could stand on this particular story itself, and it is perhaps because of this soap opera-like second film within this film. It may have more appeal for women than it does for men, which at the outset would seem a little strange, and that you would think a film with the name of Twister that had the aspects of maybe a little science fiction and horror monster movie thrown in might appeal more to men, but because of that sort of soap opera-like love story, which is also played right along with the Twister, it may turn out to be more popular with women. But be that as it may, I thought that this is a disappointing film, and I don't recommend it. It's a film which might interest because of the effects, and somebody might, for that reason, want to go. I think that any afternoon soap opera could probably be at least as satisfying in terms of the romantic aspects that to be found in this movie. Certainly anybody who watches those afternoon films would be at home in this movie's love story. It does have a happy ending in the way, kind of a moral ending, so we applaud them for that. Now, the next movie that we wish to take a look at is a kind of an interesting film to me, with a New Orleans locale, and its name, of course, Heaven's Prisoner, starring Baldwin, Alex Baldwin, and a cast of many. But all these New Orleans stories seem to have in common a corrupted, steamy, tangled tale filled with lust and crime. And this particular story is not too different. However, I thought it was pretty well done, and I think it might be worth seeing. You might find it worth seeing. It's directed by a fellow named Joannou and I thought he did a good job also. It's a complicated story with that odd curiosity of people that one finds in New Orleans, in that environment. The story begins actually with Baldwin in a Roman Catholic church setting, in a confessional setting. We understand that that he is a man with a drinking problem in the past, perhaps an alcoholic reformed, certainly a heavy drinker, and this is a potential sword of Damocles over his head, we understand. He seems to be keeping away from it, but apparently it's on his mind quite a lot. Myself, I don't think that probably something like that would be a problem to somebody after they have stayed away from it a while, unless, of course, they hung out with the same drinking companions and went to the same pubs and stuff like this. Of course, then it would be a temptation. But reform, of course, means more than putting away the bottle. And so it was with Alex Baldwin. He had his character a little hazy on this. I think it was something like Charbonneau. But at any rate, a former policeman in New Orleans. And there's something about the jobs of hookers and policemen that seem to drive them a little bit to drink or to drugs or something. I won't say all policemen, but there's certain lines of police work that seem to wear on the mind quite a lot. And maybe it was so with this guy. But at any rate, he had taken his wife, and I think played by Masterson, and gone to New Iberia, an attractive South Louisiana town, and taken up a little business catering to fishermen. Things are going along in a very easy way for him, which is appropriate for that area. And he is with his wife out on the water in their little small craft. And we get a very nice scene of almost like a water bird of some sort soaring along the weaving coastline and up a tributary and so forth. But this is no bird or normal bird. This is an airplane that is coming, and it is going to crash. In fact, the plane goes right over the top of the small craft that Baldwin and Masterson are in, and smashes into the water. Goes low. It's not such deep water, but nevertheless, the plane crashes, a twin-engine small craft. So, being a responsible fellow, Baldwin contacts the Coast Guard of the incident and gets on his scuba gear and goes down. And he opens it up and finds a large Latino fellow with a tattoo. He's dead. They find a priest dead, and I think a woman in there. And he sees a little child who is sort of treading water and gulping a pocket of air in the plane, remaining in the plane, and he goes there and retrieves the little girl, and she has taken in some water and so forth in the process, and they get her up, and his wife gives her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and the child pulls through. A young girl, perhaps something in the order of 10, maybe 10, 11. She speaks Spanish, of course. They have a communication problem. But this couple being childless, the wife, Masterson, takes a quick maternal interest in the child. And so it looks like this thing might develop with that they would keep the child, maybe if they could, possibly with some idea of adoption down the road or something like this. This is not spelled out in the story in any kind of way, just an assumption. In the little business that Baldwin has, he has an assistant, a tall, older black guy who is sort of running the fishing business on a day-to-day basis, or is sort of the manager, as it were, when Baldwin is not around. We learned that the business is prospering enough that they have taken in at least one other fellow to take the fishermen out, guide them and so forth, because this fellow that Baldwin has hired tells him that the new guy has run a boat up on a sandbar or something like this. So we have all these little minor kind of problems in a rather mundane, easy domestic setting. We have what seems to be the outstanding event, the very extraordinary event in this easy and unruffled life, that is the crash of the plane. But this is really just the beginning. And this film is one in which we see the Baldwin character drawn back into the investigative world. He does not become a cop again per se, but he becomes a cop in everything but according to the badge. He is visited shortly after the crash by a DEA guy, and we quickly understand that the characters in that plane, at least in part, were mixed up in drugs. One of the people is, I believe, named Escobar, and the man with the tattoo, or one of the people there. The DEA man, oddly enough, as a matter of fact, curiously, in striking Baldwin's attention immediately, denied the fact that there was this big guy with a tattoo there, but actually was sort of making out that there was only like a priest and a couple there, and a little girl, and where was the little girl? They didn't find the girl on the plane and so forth. So this puts a complication into the mind of Baldwin, and perhaps jeopardizes the notion of possibly keeping the child. They start meeting trouble after trouble. Baldwin gets beaten up by a fellow, as I took it to be the new hireling, and also somebody who owns a tavern who seems to be connected to the local mafiosi. It turns out Baldwin was also a schoolmate of the Eric Roberts character, who is a local rising hoodlum king, but one still subservient to the local mafiosi king. And we get all these drawn into the deal, and the Eric Roberts character is married to a woman who was reared in a bordello, a woman who drinks, it looks like, all the time. We see her nude the first time we see her, drinking something out of gin Ricky, I think, is the drink of choice. So we have all these curious people showing up in this film. And the cast is as curious as that popped up in the Oliver Stone Kennedy New Orleans film. But at any rate, Baldwin keeps on going, and he keeps on getting bruised and beaten and doing his share of the same. His wife gets murdered. Things just get very messy for him. He has a hooker, a friend, that he brings in to take care of the little girl. He tries to turn his room he has and his former wife, his deceased wife's room, into a kind of shrine and so forth. We have all kinds of oddities. We have voodoo or Haitian types, assassins, all kinds of people of curious ways popping up and doing devilment. So this is an intriguing film. It has it's well made, well filmed, well produced, well acted. I thought Baldwin was a little impressive. I had not seen him before, so I was not expecting for him to produce as well as he did. This is, I think, a film worth seeing. Also, I will say, in regard to the film Mission Impossible, the cruise vehicle, that it's a interesting action vehicle film. It is a more concentrated version of what was seen on TV, with more pizzazz, of course. It took a little time for me to get the John Voight character in my mind as Phelps, but he has seemingly hit a good stride here with these supporting roles that he is taking on, and does a good job in this film, as he did in the supporting role he played in the film Heat. We think that this is okay for someone to see. Be that as it may, I'd like to say a word or two about the film The Arrival, a Charlie Sheen vehicle. This film was directed and written by a gentleman named Toohey. And it was sort of interesting, I thought, and worth seeing. It is one of a growing group of films which have the underlying idea that we are not alone in the universe, that there is intelligent life out there, and that it's hostile, and that it wants the earth. Therefore, to protect ourselves and survive, it must be necessary to give up such provincial notions as nations and so forth, and join together in a global union so that we can defend ourselves against these alien, hostile creatures. Now, of course, no one has ever shown that such exists. It's certainly within the capacity of Hollywood or intelligence operations to fabricate such a threat, and I fully expect such a thing to happen. However, and parenthetically, I'll say that it is said that that a scheme is underfoot so that a satellite, I think nicknamed Galileo, which will descend into Jupiter, a star in the making, about 1999, carrying a load of plutonium, something like 45, 50 pounds worth, which, as the Galileo vehicle orbit machinery craft, however best termed, as it descends or is drawn into Jupiter, the pressure and so forth will cause it to explode and ignite the hydrogen and helium, and thus burst forth as a star, which has already been given a name, Lucifer, which it is hoped to have occur in the year 2000. And this will be hailed as the return of Lucifer. Well, you see, there are all kinds of strange plottings going on in this world. And the fact that you don't plot does not mean that others don't. We have right here an idea that there are creatures out there. It starts out in a mundane way. We have Sheen playing a character named Zane Zeminski. He's in a NASA-like facility, either NASA or NASA, under NASA's umbrella, with a task of listening to sounds in space. on off shot that our message could be picked up, and it just so happens that Zane Zeminski and his co-worker in the facility do get what seems to be a message of some sort of sound coming from outer space. In conclusion, at the very end, we learned that this particular lad, the black kid that we had met earlier, was himself an alien, and we have a fight at the facility in the desert where Sheen overcomes his old boss and the Fed cop types of aliens and a few others and so forth, and sends forth the kid is getting ready to run off, and he pauses, and Sheen tells him, he tells the kid, tell your kind that we know, and the next time it's not going to be so easy.